My name is Neill Gernon. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of Yard. We're the creators of Rebuild Local. And today we have the lovely Vikki Barcroft, head of events from ARM or ARM.com to talk about hybrid dev events and best practices within hybrid events. So before we get started, a bit of context to the event. So for this event, we might be talking about a variety of things, including best practices for preparing and running hybrid dev events, how to think about the events themselves from content to engagement, how to manage both from a tooling perspective, and how remote has changed just running events in general. So we'll even go into the nitty-gritties of like the characteristics of event teams or organizers, the tools that they may use to put on a different type of event and a different type of an event experience. So there's a bunch of stuff we'll be talking about, which should be fun, and we might go off cuff altogether. So before Vikki, I get an intro from you. I'm just going to give a bit of context to Rebuild Local and then the company behind Rebuild Local. So people understand why we're here, why we have the initiative to do this. So Rebuild Local was something that was born out of myself and my team talking to a lot of technical events, meetup and community organizers around the world that were struggling with the challenge of thinking about how to effectively run online events and questioning how they're going to navigate things when thinking about hybrid also. And we said, talking to them separately, why not do it together? And so Rebuild Local was born as a kind of an events and community initiative to bring people together, capture knowledge, and then document and share it, so that under kind of one banner, people would have the events, content, even connections, and just a resource to share with other peers, so they're a bit better prepared for online or hybrid events. And then the context of that would be, so Yard, we created Rebuild Local. It was fitting to our mission. We're going to speak into technical meetup organizers. We are an event and community platform that was built during the COVID phase last year, where we realized technical meetup and event organizers were left a little bit neglected, and so we built a platform to support those. That's basically a free developer event platform. So that's it. All details can be found on rebuild-local.yard.live, including this recording, and you can also find our YouTube page after that. Now, that was quite a big segue, excuse me. Trying to cut it down, but that's all from me. So Vikki, it'd be awesome to get a little bit of context, an intro from yourself, context to your background experience.
Yeah, sure. So hi, everyone. I'm Vikki, as Neill said. I'm currently the Global Director at ARM for their external marketing events. I've also worked with them in internal events. And in fact, while I was doing that, I was leading the team through the beginning of the pandemic. So there was quite an overnight shift, as I'm sure everyone's aware, to virtual events, and just leading the team through that, coming up with the ideas, learning everything that we could, and making sure we pulled off quite an effective first ever virtual conference for ARM for its internal employees. Yeah, so it was a bit of a whirlwind 6 weeks, I think we had to switch it from a physical event to a virtual. So steep learning curve, but gave a really good basis actually for what happened in the following 18 months. And yeah, to this day, I've worked with lots of different clients through my own business, but ARM's sort of taken up the majority of my time in the last 18 months. And even back then, we didn't know how long the pandemic was obviously going to really affect events. So straight off, we were talking about hybrid, and actually straight off talking about how we could start to phase back in, mixing real life people with the online community as well. So yeah, there's been a lot of thinking, a lot of planning around all of that. Yeah, that's probably cool. just a bit of me. Yeah.
So I'm dying to ask the first hybrid specific question, but I'd be interested, like, because you've been doing stuff for yourself just in the event space for a long time. What was your transition into ARM or ARM? Like you've obviously done not just like events, a lot of technical and developer stuff over the years. It'd be cool just to hear context. Just curious.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, my background, I guess, yeah, I've done a lot in different software companies, tech companies. Was very focused on delivering in-person conferences, workshops, exhibition presence internationally, across Europe, US. At the moment, also leading the APAC team. So, everything I guess that had touched from a working in-house at a tech company, all of those marketing style events and some of the internal events for employees as well. I also, have worked really closely with a place called the Bradfield Centre and Cambridge Wireless, which are, known very well in Cambridge, in that sort of heart of the Silicon Valley of the east of England, and a lot of that was actually building up the community, the tech community, at the Bradfield Centre, and we did that through meetups. So I was reaching out to a lot of organisers, actually offering them a little bit of extra support because, like you already referred to, Neill, it's actually a tough job being an event manager, and a lot of meetup organisers are trying to juggle their day job whilst doing a successful meetup as well. So my role was very much bringing that community there, but also being able to offer a bit of extra support just to help them plan the event and help to market through our own channels as well. So yeah, I've done a bit of everything, I think, over my 15 or so years in events. But yeah, my heart's always been around sort of the tech community and just communities really in general, just building that up.
Nice. Yeah, that's good. We know James well. He was on one of our leader series. He was great. So I immediately I'm going off, like we shared some bullet pointed. Hey, well, let's go in this direction. I'm immediately going off script because of something that we've been talking about internally. And there's been a little bit of a vibe on Twitter on this topic right now, whether it's Europe or the US. And the question is when for hybrid. So there's been a lot of talk, documentation, some planning. But we've seen some activity this week, both in actually in the UK and Ireland, broader in Europe, and specifically in the US. Are they going to be false starts? Do you have any thoughts on when hybrid is going to actually happen and then continue to? And are you prepared for that, whether it's an ARM or your own stuff?
Yeah, I think to be honest, it's a bit of a non-answer in some ways, but I think it will be different. It will be different for every single company, every single region, and then more widely country based. I think I'll use ARM as an example. ARM has been incredibly cautious throughout the whole period, really, of the pandemic. They're making sure that we're opening back up slowly to make sure that we're in person. So from an event perspective, the first real in-person events will be from next year, but already started to think about it. And I think it was interesting, actually, quite recently, one of our biggest events that's always traditionally been about bringing a certain community together, that happens every year in person. The decisions was made very recently that actually this has got to be hybrid as well. And I think that the difference is what online is added to in-person events is so important. It's more making things more inclusive and accessible. There's huge sustainability goals in ARM specifically, but a lot of companies are focusing on that as well. So I think the time is already here. It's now. If you're planning an event, you've got to consider hybrid. There are some events, you won't necessarily need it, but I think, any event that I'm planning, whoever it's for, whether it's for ARM or for other clients, it's going to be a case of, to guarantee an event can go ahead still, not to be pessimistic about the pandemic, but you've got to have some sort of online presence. You've got to be able to adapt it, and be able to flex your numbers in person based on where you're holding the event, how many people that you want to have there and need there, how you can flex up and down with COVID, like local COVID restrictions to wherever you are. So I think it's already here, it's upon us. It's another new sort of form of event. So we're sort of starting back where we were.
Yeah, do you think this is something that we touched on off camera on our last chat, like a good few weeks ago, and something you just pointed out just there when you mentioned the diversity conversation? From our conversations, we've even a lot of not a lot of, one of the trends in the feedback and the consistency was about the increase in a more diverse audience for online events. We also talked, it's kind of linked to that, about companies trying to get their head around community and events and quantifying the value of the production, the engagement, where is the ROI. And those two are kind of like linked, but even in isolation, we've seen the diversity as a trend and a topic that turned into a KPI for companies. Companies that have the obligation and KPI to make sure they do that. Those two interlinked. Do you think companies are or will have a chance to rethink about the quantifiables behind an event and community, the event within the community, whether they're looking to hire or whether they're looking to influence from a DevRel perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think in some ways, we'll probably get on this later, it doesn't suit everybody, but I think in some ways virtual events, which will continue through to hybrid, is an event manager's dream from a point of view of data and actually being able to prove the worth of an event. I mean, you can literally find out exactly when every single one of your attendees has engaged with any content on your event, for how long, see how many conversations they've had with other attendees. So from a community point of view, how many conversations actually went on. From a networking point of view, you can really see the actual stats to back it up. If the purpose of, and it always comes down to the purpose of the event, but if one of the main objectives is to bring people together and connect them and forge those relationships and make those conversations happen, you've got all the data you need to prove that you're doing that on a virtual event. And I think what will happen with hybrid is the role of the event app, which was always depends on what company you're at or what event you're doing. But it was always it's often a nice to have, or it was like, well, it's a good little tool to have a bit of info about what's happening in the actual venue at what time. But I think now that will become a key part of things, and making sure that integrates well across the virtual world and the in-person world, so that data is merged, and you still encourage the people who are in the venue to still be using that app and still use it for asking questions in a talk, or connecting to arrange meetings through it, actually on site at the event as well. So yeah, it's massive. And it's great.
And just on that, just kind of rolling with the punches with that actual topic, are you thinking about these separately, or maybe together, or maybe even differently than what I'm about to say about your thought on purpose of event, right? So we've seen some things, for example, when I had my community and I was looking to bring it online last year, Dublin AI, it was now not so much just a traditional community as was run offline. It was content. It was a content mechanism, if you like. It generated content. So are you thinking about like what to optimize? Do you do like both content engagement? Do you separate those? And then like for hybrid, again, you're generating content online, but very much if you people in a room, obviously they're for content, but also like peers and connectivity. And how are you wrestling with that idea or concept of like content plus engagement?
Yeah, I think so. So it's probably one that that needs to be tackled really on an event by event basis to some level, I think. Generally speaking, I think there should be a consistent stream of content to both audiences in hybrid. So, so there's something that everyone can be a part of constantly throughout that time, and that both online and in person attendees can communicate effectively and answer questions using something like Slido or whatever it is that whatever tool it is, that's been used in in-person events for ages anyway, and so there's no reason why you just can't do that for for people to integrate and engage with and interact with the content both online and in person. I think the delivery of content needs to be thought about quite differently. With online events, I think generally, doing an hour session is one thing if it's a part of a conference. If every session is still going to be an hour long, it's so hard to sit and watch when you're at home, and so distracting to you'll see other things and you won't be paying full attention. I think online content should be a bit more short and snappy, and thinking about it as a bit of a a TV show almost, where you're getting in the right things and you're getting the phone in and the text in and stuff, and interacting on social media around it if that fits with the event. But yeah, it's and then providing this on-demand content after. That on-demand content can be delivered in person, and as long as it's recorded, then the people on site at the conference, they can go, they can see it, they're fully immersed in it. But then everybody who hasn't been able to physically make it, they can still catch up and they can still get access to all of that content. So it's a much bigger job, but I think as long as you think about the relationship between the content and engagement from both parties, and find a way to bring it together, I think I can't see a way that it wouldn't work.
Yep. Interesting. So going back to ARM specifically, I know you touched on it, but for you looking at that from an organization side, and then for you leading that, as you mentioned, companies are all at different stages in thinking about and planning or in acting on it. What kind of wrestling is happening to try to get things to work from a hybrid perspective, and is it just like operations, just from an event operations and management side, is it completely different? What are your thoughts on that for one organization side, and from for now and maybe next, and whether it's like just the wrestling of tools, extra partners, content, engagement, and offline venues, or like, is it the same old event, or how are you thinking with the ARM hat? How are you thinking about it?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be totally blunt at the moment with the ARM hat, because of certain things that obviously when contracts for the in-person events that were happening before the pandemic, they were in place. You sort of do what you can to get out of them, and but a lot of contracts are still sort of in place, and but just kept being postponed. So there's an element of it that, and I think this is an area that needs work, I think, probably for every team. It's not thinking about it, which we are at the moment, for the most part, thinking about it as, oh, okay, well, we're doing a physical event and then we're doing a virtual event on top of it. It is thinking about it as a hybrid event, which is, again, another event type, and it's just doing one event in multi-environments. But, you have teams that are very experienced in delivering in-person events, and that's where their comfort zone is, and that's where they really excel, and their expertise is very much focused on that, and they can't wait to get back to in-person events and all the luxuries of not having to pre-record all the content and doing all of that stuff. But then you've got other people in the team that love a bit of event tech and software and are getting really excited about the possibilities and the capabilities. And it's trying to fuse them and bring both of those together. So in the planning at the moment, it's, you know, in either conversation where people are getting excited about online or excited about in person, it's like, yes, but have you thought about how will that work? How will that translate online, and vice versa? If you want to do this online, how actually we're going to make it part of the actual physical event? So it's just asking the right questions throughout the whole process, but making sure, I will bring this up quite a lot, understanding that purpose and the strategy. Why are you even doing the event in the first place? And once you've got that, you can then think of all these different tools and the different ways that, and everything we've learned over the last 18 months of how to make sure virtual events are engaging, and what we already know from before, we can now make events so much better than they've ever been, and involve so much more people, or even just, you know, not necessarily more people, but the right people, and make sure that, you know, you're not missing people just because they can't fly halfway around the world to come.
Yeah, interesting. Out of that, kind of two bullet pointed questions, if you like. How are you thinking about, like, you may have just answered it there from saying it depends, right, on the event type, the purpose, and the strategy. But how are you thinking about the operation stack or the tools stack? And then the other question would be, so first of all, how are you thinking about that? Does that change? And also then the talent stack from an event management and operation perspective. How are you thinking about that? And does that change? So tools and talent.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, tools first. I think with ARM, they've probably always used various event partners, whether it's been, you know, to do the registration software, or you know, build event websites, AV, and, you know, graphics, all of those things. There's always sort of a whole team of internal people plus agency support. So I think it's knowing, and this will cross over tools and talent actually, but I think it's knowing what your strengths are in-house, and then outsourcing what you haven't got, basically. The way I see it from a tools point of view, I don't think it has to be as complicated as potentially some might feel it is, but I tend to try and have quite a positive and you know, almost simplistic view of stuff. It's like, well, you know, we can make this happen. Any event needs some form of way to register, and has already an event site, whether it's, you know, filling in some information on something that's already templated, you know, whether it's, you know, a meetup or whatever it has been, it's still an event page, an event site, and it's still something that where people can register their interest to attend and gain all the access they need to do to so they know how to get to the physical event. If it's an online event, the same thing happens. You just include how to actually access the event online. So for me, either event needs a page or a website. For a hybrid event, that's no different. It's just you make sure it's got the functionality to do both. So there might be different partners or suppliers that you'll fish out, you'll find that might actually have already figured out how to put both of these things together. Make sure you've got a good on-demand section of your site. Make sure you've got streaming capabilities of your registration and event site. But other than that, like I still feel that it's, you know, you'll get a venue, sure, and you'll have an event website, and as long as you make sure that both have the right functionality, I think you're pretty set. I mean, obviously, it will probably cost more in the short term, certainly, before it becomes a more established way of doing events, because you need to make sure you've got either the right venue set up or the right AV team to be able to record all of your sessions as well, and either simultaneously stream or be recording and then uploading it afterwards. But I mean, a lot of events that I've been doing, you know, all the sessions have been pre-recorded for virtual events anyway. So like, it's just moving the studio to being recording live on the day of the event. So I think it's just breaking it down into all of those things that you need to think about, and seeing where they confuse. And I think, you know, from a tools perspective, you need the right software to run your event, and you need the right software to make sure there's audience interaction and engagement. And there's plenty out there. It is a bit of a minefield, but if you're a company or an event that uses an agency, make sure it's the right agency. Go out and say, this is what we want, and we want to, figure out how to do this with somebody who can tell us what we need to do and manage that process.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally makes sense. And off that, like my next question was about kind of offline specifically, just the experiences for offline, but you touched on recording, pre-event recording, and then showcasing that. Does that fit into well, it can of course fit into hybrid, and do you think companies will end up making a decision and try to optimize one side depending on the event type and the purpose and the desirable output, or even the audience? Do you think companies will start trying to optimize for that, get prepared with the online stuff, get the high quality content if it's pre-recorded, and then look after that and chop it up or whatever, repurposing and all that great stuff for online? But do you think that if you get that done, and there seems to be great tools and capabilities to do that, it gives companies the ability to optimize and put more effort into the offline? And my real question within that, are we going to see higher quality offline experiences where maybe it's smaller audiences initially and companies really go this is going to be totally pimped out, cool, branded, it's going to be a really good experience? Because if that has the ability to now people thinking of streaming that and it going globally, it's pretty good from a brand perspective, right? Are you thinking about that, optimizing just offline experiences?
Yeah, I think again, it will depend on the event. You'll get your event, you'll set out what you want to do and where your audience is and how you're going to get them to the event and what content they need to see and be engaged with. There are going to be some events that should be purely in person, offline. They should be purely virtual, online. And then there'll be the ones that you actually do a bit of both. I think from a branding and a sort of, I guess, thinking about your stage set normally at a conference, that's going to be, I would say, multi-purpose, really. I think that's now going to be half stage, half studio. And so, whether, and I think, there'll always be a way to integrate video, and people be a bit more accepting of video, even if you're sitting physically in the room as well, with certain bits of content. I think, there'll be impressive sets. There'll be sets that you're able to record from. I don't think in a hybrid scenario, a lot of the stuff will be pre-recorded personally, because I think, pre-recording it and then actually doing it face to face, I think, I quite like the rawness of just hearing someone talk live and knowing that it hasn't been ridiculously over edited at the end, to make sure it's perfectly polished and scripted, and maybe hearing a bit of audience interaction, like the laughter track on TV. I think that will add to the online experience actually, and add to the ability for the online audience to be immersed in the physical event that's going on as well. But I think it will vary. There's going to be some events, and it's one thing that I was thinking about with Arm straight off when we first converted some of the events. So it's actually traditionally an event. It's the same event that's done for internal employees, but it's done in different regions. But those regions would never meet each other because it was a physical event. Now it's an online global event. So all the regions can connect with each other and meet each other as new starters. And it's all, actually hits the objective of the event way better. But you know what? It will also be nice to bring local regional communities together still as well in the future. And I think where that'll happen, we'll have some live speakers in each region, and some will be streamed into the room, some you'll see in person, but then everybody locally will still get to have a coffee with each other and make that face-to-face connection, but you'll still be in this online community as well as part of the event, where you can still talk to all of your colleagues that are around the world.
interesting. You've forced me to skip 2 questions to go on to that question about the community side. How has thoughts changed on that, and how do you see that now in terms of maybe for companies, again, like quantifying the value, or maybe you can state like what you see as the value, and then how companies are quantifying the value of collaborating and connecting with developer communities. And like now, we see it like as a treasure chest. Things have opened up. Like you can really have the ability to go, yeah, I'm going to run or sponsor or connect with that group, Java Copenhagen next week. Or how do you think about that? About like not inside, about like ARM or other companies creating their own communities or creating their own events, but the connectivity to community events.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's awesome, because I think that what has happened is, you know, and it's not just really just thinking about events, it's just thinking about how the world has changed, I guess, in the last 18 months, you know, from you know, just meetings that you need to have. People have learned how to engage online and connect with, you know, have the option to connect with people on, you know, on Slack or Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. I think everyone's a bit sick of it in some ways, and I think everyone like definitely misses seeing people in person. But I think there'll be a bit of a boom towards like, can I actually do this in person? And actually, no, I'm not interested in seeing anything online if I can go there in person. But then I think it'll come back round to, well, actually, all that anybody has ever wanted is just the option to choose. And so if you can, you know, for me, working at home, I love working at home, but now all I want to do is work in an office. So I'm now, you know, I never thought that I'd be desperate to go into an office at least 2 or 3 times a week, but now I cannot wait to do that, because what I liked about working from home is that it was a choice, because it made most sense for me to do it and avoid, you know, a 2-hour round trip or whatever it was. And so I think the same principles apply to events and online communities. It's great to be able to think you can connect with anyone wherever in the world. I mean, provided you want to stay up or get up early enough if it's in, you know, the US or APAC or wherever. But yeah, I think people really understand the value in that, and that should carry on. And I think particularly with the you know, with the developer community, I think, you know, we are building, I mean, it doesn't have to be specific to ARM, but for ARM, we're building an online community over the past 2 years for our big sort of Dev Summit event that's happening towards the end of October. If we just got rid of that for next year, and it's like, oh, well, you can come to our event, but you've got to fly to, you know, the Bay Area in California to do it, we'd lose like probably 10,000 attendees, because, you know, we have limitations of venue capacity. And it's about, with big events like that, it's not about that single event, actually. It's about that community around it, and, you know, all the things that happen off that event, you know, the things that spark people's interests and ideas, and, you know, keep people talking and make them want to come back and see what, you know, what ARM's up to, or what whoever's up to, you know, the next year. And that has to be able to be done online to some level, because, you know, you're not, with communities, you're not in an office with everybody together. You don't have that luxury. You can only meet up on, you know, maybe once a month if there's someone local to you. But I think connecting the different, you know, if you said Java, but if it's a Java community, you know, some way to connect all of those different meetups is probably the way forward, really. It's like figuring out what's happening in Copenhagen, but also like, yeah, but what are we doing in London, or, you know, Cambridge or Ireland, or, you know, wherever it is, and sort of passing around and sharing all of that content and information, and seeing what else we can learn.
Cool. Yeah. Obviously, I agree with that. That's something that we're thinking about a lot, right? So, Another question I had was relating to that, like specifically the offline part of hybrid, or whether it's social or content driven. Um, how are you thinking about like rules for the first hybrid or offline events? Safety, people. I think this is going to be something that probably be a hot topic for a certain amount of time. Hope, touch wood, it was all going well. Um, Different expectations, different needs and wants, and different fears and concerns from people. Some are ready to like right now get on a plane, and some are not so much. How are you thinking about that? And yeah.
Well, I think that's the beauty of hybrid, to be honest. You give people the option. There isn't a rule, there isn't a one size fits all event anymore for your attendees on an individual basis. And similarly, actually, there will be rules on different regions and different areas that can change at any point on what attendees are actually physically allowed to do, depending on what's happening. You know, if COVID cases suddenly spike somewhere, then you might not be able to hold an event there anymore. You know, you've got to have that flexibility with it, and show, I think, as event organisers that you've thought about it and that you care enough about your attendees to say, look, this is what we've put in place. You know, it's going to be part of your event description. Like, you know, we are limiting our capacity to this. If it's, you know, an intense indoor spot, if you want to do that, or if you know your attendees well enough to think, okay, we've got the sort of attendees that are the majority, they're all just ready for it, they do all just want to jump on the plane, and they do all just want to you know, have a big party indoors somewhere. You know, it's tailoring your approach in your marketing and your communications, but showing that you still thought about it. And yeah, as I said at the beginning, really just giving your attendees that option, so they don't feel that, you know, they're being forced to attend in person if they don't have to. But at the same time, you want to protect your event. You want to make sure there are certain people there. But I think, you know, a good way to do that is limiting numbers, because it becomes then a bit of a, okay, to attend in person, it's sort of an exclusive event. You've got to register now, get your interest in, and then you cut it off. And then you know that you've got your max capacity, you've hit that, and you're happy with that as the offline section of the event. But then you can open it up to however many people you want to catch up with the content online.
I totally agree. Something that I've thought about for a while. It becomes a little bit more exclusive, and maybe not for certain people that actually don't want to. It doesn't become exclusive at all because they don't want to be there. But for those who do, it's kind of, there's constraints. Constraints are always good for those kind of things, exclusivity and safety, and probably improved the ability for, versus a huge venue, a smaller venue, so more budget to improve the brand and the experience. And for me anyway, I've always preferred small, whether it's workshops or events, because you might actually speak to the majority of people. Or, you know, I love the 30 to 50. It's, you know, it's great. And then the conferences, like you go to a 3,000 person conference to see the talks, and you see, like, you know, 1/10 of it, but that also has value as well, of course. I like that stuff as well. But yeah. But
it's true on that is the sweet spot really for you know, in-person events. That's why I think even at the big events, you break that down, and you do have the breakout rooms, you have the breakout sessions, and you try and still create that sense of, okay, well, 30 to 50 people, you're all in this room because you're all interested in this topic, so all have a chat about it.
I suppose in one way it forces large events, medium to large events organisers to rethink that event by start segmenting it, chopping it like departments, if you like, little compartments, which will kind of it's kind of like different kind of UX maybe thinking to, and that can really be good for maybe connectivity and peers and stuff. So makes sense. So I had a couple of final questions, but I'd one before that, which I've kind of written down from something that was triggered from what you said earlier. It's kind of interesting. Offline, for a hybrid event, the offline audience interacting with the online audience. That's kind of cool. Have you thought about that?
I've thought about it. I must admit I haven't done a huge amount of research into it yet, because I don't think I've personally been close enough to really delivering a hybrid yet. But I have some, I have like crazy ideas and all sorts of stuff about,
We like them.
About making sure there's sort of I don't know if we chatted about this actually before anyway, but getting almost like the like robots with screens on that, is then getting somebody to dial into that, and so you still can meet somebody somewhere as at a venue, but instead of meeting by an actual person, you'll rock up to a table or whatever it is, and you'll have like a sort of a remote controlled robot with the screen on, and you'll have stick on a headset and have a chat with them, or I mean, scaled down, obviously they could just be virtual meeting booths at the very least, that you'd still book a slot in and still go and just have a Zoom conversation or whatever it is, but yeah, I think there's ways to still get that community to actually have real conversation together during an event.
There's always stuff like that like improves or is not kind of cool for the experience and something different, and yeah, I like that kind of stuff. It's kind of cool. So I had two more kind of fitting onto that as well. Two final questions. One was kind of like, let's reverse and let's kind of layer onto what you were just talking about, which is more ideas. Do you have any like priority must-haves or wants, like in the idea category? The next question is going to be, do you have any priority problems to solve? Like if you had a magic wand, so like first on the idea or wants or priorities for Vikki, it's like, what would you love? It's like, oh God, if I could do this, whether there's any value in it, like it could be something for business value, to improve your job, or just bloody cool.
So yeah, I think to be honest, this actually goes back to before the pandemic started, and everyone looked at me like I was crazy, which happens a lot. But I went around Event Tech Live actually, asking people if they could, because I mean, at certain companies you have the luxury of a decent amount of budget, but I was asking, can we build like a gaming world, like actually, so that's based on the actual, I mean, it'd be more fun if it wasn't actually based on the actual venue, that for the offline portion of it, but so it is based on that, and you can still, everyone can have their own avatar and interact like you would in the game. You can have your headset on and you can properly interact with people and walk around the venue to go to your session, and it's it's a bit of a game, so it's adds that fun element to it. I'd like to see a way that could work, everybody, and this is blue sky, like just crazy sort of thinking about how we could make something really, really fun and immersive happen. Everyone's sitting at home with their Oculus Rift or other VR headset on, that doesn't want to be there in person, but is still walking around and still seeing that, and people can still interact, and then if that in one day, if that can actually be layered over what's really happening there, and it's more, I guess, AR, or you can and even having it in person, having those like I don't know what happened to Google Glasses really. I don't know how far they've gone along, but
I think that was like that's kind of like an expensive R&D marketing phase, but like the AR VR, well, the AR for something like what you're doing, but yeah, it also like gamification like fits into kind of the experience of an event, and like it's kind of cool. I've seen some companies play in that area of like the AR stuff, and then the even platforms trying to build kind of virtual sites. So yeah,
there's been a few. I think there's the ones that I've seen and used so far are still effectively a website with some images and some animations, for the most part, that
Yeah.
are more readily available and that are probably at this point more robust.
Any suggestions? Any top ones that you remember, or?
I think they've all got their pluses and minuses, to be honest. I mean,
Cool.
you know, the big ones, I guess, are, you know, people like VFairs and On24, or the sort of the ones that were already there before, and then they've just really sort of, I guess, tried to up the game over the last 18 months. But you know, they're the standard ones. But I think you know, I've had a couple of bespoke builds, and there's a few agencies that are doing quite good jobs of that, and you know, completely skin it up. You go wild, go, you know, imagine whatever venue you want to do, and you can do it. You know, there's some agencies I've worked with before, a Live Union, and you know, I'm actually going to be doing some work with Fresh, and so I know they've got a lot of good plans in the pipeline to make sure they've got some really fun platforms to use as well.
Cool. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Unfortunately, Vikki hasn't joined us because her internet has crashed. So she slightly changed her priority of problems to solve and framing good Wi-Fi for everyone, everywhere. These things happen, and we certainly think about it, but unfortunately it's something out of our control. And when you're thinking about audio and video platforms, events and communities, it is a reality. So we'd like to thank Vikki for taking the time and joining us. It was an awesome chat on all things hybrid. Thank you guys for watching. All details can be found on rebuilds-local.yard.live, and all the leader sessions recordings and videos can be found on our YouTube channel, which you can also find through our website. We hope this was helpful and you all enjoyed, and for more Rebuild Local stuff, updates related to content, events, even documentation that we'll be releasing, and playbooks for technical meetup and event organizers, it'll all be found on the website. So that's it for now. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you'll join us again in a local session or online.